Today's episode is brought to you by Manoogian Law. Facing a Tarik Skubal fastball is scary. You know what else is scary? Walking into a courtroom without someone who has your best interests at heart. And that is where Max Manoogian comes in. Confidence in the courtroom is his slogan. And it's easy to see why. With over 11 years of criminal defense experience, Manoogian Law is your go-to in Oakland, Wayne, and Macomb counties, as well as all of Southeast Michigan. The man knows his way around a courtroom. Easy to contact and a straight shooter, Max Manoogian is in the business of helping his clients, not nickel and diming those in need. Step into the batter's box with confidence with Manoogian Law. Friend of the podcast, a diehard Tigers fan, and proud sponsor of Turning the Corner. Contact Manoogian Law at 248-973-7527. And welcome into a very special episode of Turn the Corner, a Detroit Tigers podcast. I am Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, is Cody Stavenhagen. And with me for the first time is President of Baseball Operations for your Detroit Tigers, Scott Harris. Scott, thanks for joining. You doing?
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. How's it going?
Busy, exciting.
You guys have fun this weekend?
Yeah, a lot of good baseball. We won't talk about football games for either of our favorite teams, but luckily there's something else to pay attention to this time of year. So, we had a nice plan already for this show, thought of some questions, and then you had to go and make news, and so we tore all that up. So why did you just call up Jackson Jobe, and how do you think he can help this team down the stretch? I say we get right into it.
Yeah, we did make some news today. The main reason why we called Jackson up is we think he can help us. We started talking about it on this past road trip. Jackson has always had, elite pure stuff. But we felt like he was in a position in his development to come up and help us. And we think, going into a really important week of games and hopefully the playoffs, the ability to throw elite stuff at some of the hitters that we're going to face this week and then possibly in the playoffs is a huge boost for a team like ours. And I also think the more we talked about it, the more we realized like we kind of owe it to this team of players and we owe it to the fans to put our best foot forward to try to make the playoffs and hopefully go deep in the playoffs. This market hasn't been in the playoffs in a long time. And, I've been to the playoffs a few times in different organizations, and I know how hard it is to make the playoffs, and I know how special runs like this are. And so we felt like we owed it to everybody involved with the Tigers to do everything we possibly can to get in and hopefully do some damage when we get there.
So, Scott, at the trade deadline, you would kind of downplayed the idea that Jobe could come straight to the majors. At that point, he hadn't even pitched in AAA, but now he's made only 2 starts in AAA. Obviously, he wasn't perfect in either of those outings. Is there anything now that makes him more ready than he was a month or 2 ago?
Yeah, I mean, he's not a finished product at this point. He probably will not start any games for us. We view him as a starter moving forward. He's been a starter for his entire career. He's going to pitch out of the bullpen for us. So I think he's a little bit more ready for that role than he would be for a starting pitching role right now. And the circumstances changed. We are entering the last week of the season with a 1-game lead on the wild card with a real chance to get into October for the first time in a long time for this team. And again, we've felt like if we have a player like Jackson who can really help us, we should just press the button and again, give this organization every possible chance, give this team every chance to get in and hopefully play pretty well in October.
So as media covering the team and as fans, like you have access to numbers and you can watch games and see what a guy's physical makeup is. You're bringing in Jackson Jobe into a situation that he's going to be tested mentally as much as physically, probably more so. What is it about Jackson that gives you guys confidence that he can handle like what would presumably be high stress, high leverage, high pressure environments and situations?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this a few times in the context of other players' developments. We've taken um, a real stance in this organization that we're going to challenge our players along the way. We've challenged other players before we added them to the big league roster, and we challenged Jackson many times throughout the last 2 years to do things differently, to dominate the strike zone, to use all of his shapes, to change the way he sequences against certain hitters. We also did that last Saturday or last Friday. Going into that start, we never told Jackson that he was a candidate to be on our big league team this week. But we did challenge him to use his stuff a little bit differently, to attack hitters a little bit differently, and to perform a little bit differently in his last start in AAA. We funneled a lot of that through the catcher to kind of help him stay focused on just putting together a really good start. And we felt like the flashes that we saw on Friday gave us additional comfort that he could really help us. But embedded in your question is the notion that this is going to be a challenge for him. It is going to be a challenge for him. Like, he's going to face the best hitter he's ever seen in in front of more fans than he's ever pitched in front of. We feel like he has the raw ability. We know he's plenty athletic, and we know his stuff is plenty good enough to rise to the challenge. But we shouldn't expect him to dominate right out of the gate. We're excited to see what he can do this week, and hopefully he can help us win some games this week. And then, if he looks good, maybe he'll make a postseason roster in October.
The flip side of that, Scott, is Shelby Miller. How tough is it to have that kind of conversation with a veteran guy, especially at this point in the year? And obviously, it had been really up and down for Shelby. Why did you ultimately make the decision to move on?
Yeah, that was really tough. AJ and I met Shelby after the plane landed last night from Baltimore. And I can share what I told him. I said that this is the hardest part of the job. I couldn't in good conscience walk past an opportunity to add an arm that I thought could really help us this week and help us in the playoffs. Unfortunately, there's a finite number of roster spots, and we have to weigh those trade-offs. And the more we looked at it, the more we realized that we think Jackson can help us add a new dynamic to this pen. It doesn't mean that Shelby didn't get big outs for us this offseason. It doesn't mean Shelby hasn't been a great teammate. It's just this game can be ruthless and cutthroat sometimes, and unfortunately, that those are choices that I have to make. Those are really difficult decisions, and that's what I told them. So again, we feel good about both the bullpen that we are going to throw out there against the Rays this week, and we also feel good about the contributions that Shelby made for us. He got some really, really big outs for us even just last week. So it's a really difficult part of the job, but it's part of the job whether I like it or not.
Funny how that works. The best part of the job, winning games, can also come with probably more tough conversations like that, the worst part of the job. But overall, I mean, what has it been like this stretch of baseball that you've been watching? I mean, this weekend in Baltimore, when Trey Sweeney makes a catch to save the game and who knows, save the season, like, where are you and how are you reacting to a moment like that?
I think I'm reacting very similarly to the way the fans are reacting. If Trey doesn't catch that ball, the game's over. And we lose two straight to the Orioles. So I was pretty pumped up when he made the catch. Obviously, I think more generally, things I like about this team right now is we're really young and we're really athletic. We are very athletic up the middle, especially. We have two catchers that help us in a bunch of different ways behind the plate. We have Trey Sweeney at shortstop, and we have Parker Meadows in center field. Those are really good building blocks to a pretty dynamic young team. I also like that we, as a young team, like, this group is getting better, and they're going to continue to get better. That's a hallmark of young teams. We have gotten better every week in the second half, and I expect us to continue to get better. I think on the other side of the ball, the other thing I like is our pitching is pretty dynamic right now. I think after the trade deadline, we realized we're long on pure stuff and depth and short on experience, but that hasn't really hurt us. With the way we are using these guys, with the way that AJ is pressing the right buttons at the right time. I think our pitching strategy is amplifying our strengths and minimizing our weaknesses. And then the thing that I like the most about watching this group play is they have really short memories. It feels like with this group, crushing losses don't linger. Like tough innings don't follow them into the dugout like yesterday. Carp just comes back and hits a home run the very next inning. And even tough plays don't really affect the next play, like the Trey Sweeney play in the ninth inning. We had second and third, no outs in a tie game, and we just kept chugging along and found a way to win that game. So it's really fun to watch this young group. They're growing with confidence every single night, and they have really short memories, and those are attributes of really good teams.
Is culture one of the attributes? I mean, I've said this on the podcast the past couple of weeks that sometimes there are cliches, and culture is one of them that gets used a lot. I would say overused. But I don't know how else to describe, some of the moments that you just laid out there, other than culture. From the top down. Is that those things that you're describing? Is that an example of this team coming together and having an identity and embracing the culture that's been building up since before even the season started, spring training, and even before that?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought we had a good culture in spring training. I think the culture is significantly better right now. I've always enjoyed being around young teams because they bring consistent energy every single day. I think one of the attributes I like the most about this team is it feels like these young guys are playing with less pressure because there's so many of them on the team. If you have a veteran group and then you call up a top prospect, he's kind of the young guy in the corner that is trying not to say the wrong thing at the wrong time, trying not to misstep on the plane or on the bus or whatever. It feels like this group genuinely likes each other. I was in Baltimore this weekend. I've traveled quite a bit recently, and you can see these guys hanging out together a lot when they don't have to. They obviously have to hang out in the clubhouse, but they're getting dinner together. They're getting coffee in the mornings together. They genuinely like this group, and or they like each other. And I think it's the product of how young they are, how much they relate to each other, and how much they play together in the minor leagues. So those are the building blocks of a really good culture. I also think that the influence that this coaching staff and AJ have had on these young guys has been very, very positive. And yeah, I think those are, those are the most sustainable ingredients for a winning organization, is if you can create a culture like this and you can sustain it year after year. Those are the seeds of a competitive advantage, and I really like where this group is right now.
Scott, I think the most remarkable thing about this second half or post trade deadline, of course, has been the pitching. You guys have had the best ERA in baseball, despite Brant Herter and Ty Madden and Brennan Hanafy and other guys that a lot of fans probably were not even familiar with in early August. When you had that breakfast meeting with AJ, like what did you order? Did you order something that made you a genius, or how much of a plan did you actually have for what August was going to look like at that moment?
Yeah, I guess a few thoughts here. I know there aren't a lot of people who are familiar with a lot of the names in our bullpen. We are. We've been working with these guys for a long time. Like, take you mentioned Brennan Hanafy. When we first signed him as a minor league free agent, he was largely a one pitch pitcher who was trying to just jam sinkers in on righties. I think if you watch him this weekend, like, this is a guy with a sinker that he can move all around the zone. He can elevate a four seamer to the top rail. He can throw backdoor sliders to lefties, and he can throw strike the ball changeups to lefties. Like, that's a much more dynamic mix than he had when he first got here. It's a tribute to our pitching development. It's a tribute to Brennan for putting in all the work. So there are a lot of guys in this pen that aren't household names, but they've been putting in a lot of work to put themselves in a position to really help this team out. And so I'm really proud of the effort there. I think as far as, our pitching strategy, I think a lot has been made of the change in our approach after the trade deadline. I will say this: our jobs are not to force players into a predetermined model or strategy. Our jobs are to adapt to the personnel we have, adapt to the players that we have, and design strategies around them that will make them successful. I think after the deadline, we took a really hard look at the pitchers that we have and the young pitchers that were coming and decided a more non-traditional approach may suit this group better in this moment. We're not going to do this forever, but for right now with this group, using openers and bulk guys and staying a little bit more unpredictable, we'll get the most out of this group. So in that breakfast, AJ and I talked about, how do we use these guys in the right moment, and how do we set them up for success? And I think the non-traditional approach we're using is helping us in a few different ways. It's helping us hunt better matchups against most lineups. It's helping us break in some young starters into the big leagues in a more comfortable way, helping them assimilate a little bit quicker to the speed of the game at this level. And I think it helps us stay a little bit more unpredictable and difficult to match up against for the opposing manager. There are a lot more details in there on this strategy and how it's helping us. I don't think it's wise to share all of those before a really important week and hopefully a deep run into October. But, I think the thing that is most important with this is we tried to find a strategy that suits the players we have. And I think even more than that, we have a group of players that are fully bought in. They understand the strategy. They understand both from the starters and the relievers why this approach suits them best and why it's working for us. And I think, the final point I would make here is we talk a lot about the pitchers and them getting big outs. We don't talk enough about the catchers. We shouldn't overlook the challenges that this approach to pitching poses on our catchers. Raj and Ding have to be completely dialed in from a game calling perspective for this strategy to work. They deserve as much credit as the pitchers for calling the right pitches in the right moments and staying adaptable when, AJ runs out to the mound 4 times in the first 5 innings. They have to adjust to the pitcher on the mound and the hitters that are coming up. And that's not easy. We overlook that way too much.
Serious question here, Scott, and I'm curious to get your take. I've pointed out, and I've had fans get mad at me for pointing out that the Tigers have sustained an unusually low BABIP for the better part of 2 months. Now, the flip side of that, of course, you guys are top of the league in first pitch strike rates, ground ball rates, inducing weak contact. So do you think there's an element of luck and chance going on here? Like, can you keep getting by without generally more swing and miss from the staff as a whole?
Yes. I mean, are there elements of luck in this? Of course there are. I think that applies to every team that is successful over a long stretch of time. You need favorable bounces, and we certainly have gotten plenty of those over the last 6 weeks. However, I will say that we've done a lot of things really well from the pitching standpoint that are creating our own luck here. We induce a ton of ground balls. We induce a ton of soft contact. We are keeping hitters off balance with the unpredictability of our game calling, and we're missing plenty of bats and inducing a ton of chase. So I think both worlds can coexist. I think we could be doing some things that are creating our own luck, and I think we're also getting some luck. I think the final point I would make on this is our defense has gotten a lot better too. You add a player like Trey Sweeney, you get Parker Meadows off of the IL, you have the opportunity to pinch hit McKinstry and put him in the infield and move Veerling to the outfield and upgrade your infield defense and outfield defense with one move. There are a lot more levers that AJ can pull right now to both give us better matchups at the plate and strengthen our defense behind him. And I think that's a product of a very balanced roster and a very talented manager who's pushing the right buttons at the right time.
We've mentioned him a lot on this podcast, and Trey Sweeney. So let's keep with Sweeney for a second. After the deadline, you were very quick to point out that we got players in the Flaherty deal that we are enthusiastic about. And Sweeney was one that, just like those pitchers that we mentioned earlier, that we didn't necessarily know a lot about, especially considering he comes from another organization. We know you like the profile. We know there are things that attracted you to him to include in this trade. But what sort of characteristics or things could you identify that made you think because he is a AAA player, like if he had to get called up, we could rely on him to do X. Like, what were some of those traits that you identified in the process of putting him in the negotiations for a trade?
Yeah, I mean, I, I know he gets talked about as like kind of this throw in on the deal because a lot of people weren't all that familiar with him before we acquired him. Like this guy was a first round pick. This guy's really talented. He performed really well throughout the minor leagues. He's been on our radar for a long time, even when he was with the Yankees. I think some of the attributes that initially drew us to him are, first, he's a left-handed shortstop. Those guys are really hard to find. It speaks to the profile point that you alluded to in the question. Second, I think he's a sneaky, really good athlete. If you, Cody, I think you've talked to him by now. Like, it's a pretty long, lean frame, and I think he uses his length really well to extend his range in the field. To his left, to his right, but also on the play he made in Baltimore to save the game for us. I think he knows how to use his length in the same way that NBA players use their length to extend their range and defense. I think he does a really good job of that. I think the more you watch him, the more you realize that. I also spoke about his steadiness as a defender. He's not that type of flashy shortstop that is going to make the highlight reel play every night, but he's a guy that makes the plays, and I think he's still getting comfortable at this level. I think we've seen a few misplays here and there. I think those are going to, largely go away with him because we've watched a lot of video of him in the minor leagues and we spent a lot of time on him, and our scouts have spent a lot of time writing him up. I think the steadiness is going to continue to improve with him. And then the big thing for us that really inspired us to push him into this deal was we noticed a little bit more athleticism in his swing this year. We noticed that he was driving the ball a little bit better with the Dodgers. They did a really good job with him of trying to get back to the attributes that made him a first round pick. I think there's some swing adjustments stuff that we can do with him moving forward. But for right now, this guy's a pretty dynamic player. I think we got a lot better by adding him to the mix. And to your point in the question, I think the final thing that convinced me that this guy can really help us right now is he went to Toledo right after the trade and he absolutely raked. I mean, he was using the whole field. He showed power to all fields. He showed the same power to all fields in Toledo that he did in Oakland a couple of weeks ago. And I think this guy's he's a grinder with some sneaky athleticism and a pretty unique profile. And anytime you can add that guy to a deal as one of multiple players, you should probably do it. So those are some of the attributes we really like about him. In addition to the type of teammate and person he has shown to be at this level.
One of the things that strikes me, I mean, the Yankees traded him away. The Dodgers traded him away. From afar, that can look like a red flag. But I guess kind of what do you make of that fact? Or in general, are you ever wary if a team that's regarded as a smart organization is basically offering you what you view as a good player?
Not really. I mean, this isn't a shot at any organization. This is more an observation. These jobs are really hard. We all make a ton of mistakes, and I'm not saying that the Dodgers made a mistake on this one at all. I'm just saying, if you get caught up looking at the reputation of certain organizations, what you end up doing is you narrow the universe of targets for you via trade. I think we have to stay anchored to our evaluations of these players. We have to have conviction in the players we like, and we have to be willing to take risks to acquire these players. I also will note, like, he got traded for Jack Flaherty. Jack Flaherty's a really good player. So, if you're going to give up a good player, you should get a good player back. I think we got two really good players back for Jack. And I think, our fans are starting to see it with Trey in the big leagues, and the fans that have followed West Michigan got to see it with Lorenzo in the minor leagues as well.
Well, in regards to the way that this team has been on this run, there's one name that you just have to mention, and you have already, but I want to talk more about him. That's Parker Meadows. I've often said that he's one of the most exciting players on the team. I know that's like a weird thing to kind of describe a guy, but just like his athleticism, his defense, some of the raw power that he displays. I just find him to be one of the more aesthetically pleasing guys on the ball field. when a guy gets sent down and you have a message for him and a plan for him, and then he comes up and you see like the fruits of the labor, from a front office perspective, how does that feel? You know, when you watch him have success and doing the things that you guys wanted him to do in the minors, and in the majors, he is able to replicate that as well.
I mean, in my chair, I'm just really proud of the effort that both Parker put in and the group that was supporting him. You know, as you said, he's one of the most exciting players in our organization, and it's really fun to watch him because he is the type of player that we want to build around. We want to build around players that can help us on both sides of the ball. And I think in one road trip, you know, anyone who was paying attention noticed it's pretty obvious this guy helps us on both sides of the ball. He also helps us, you know, on the bases quite a bit. I think it's a good reminder of, you know, one of the goals of the organization. Like, we wanted to create this culture of development. We wanted to be the type of organization that doesn't give up on players, instead invest in players. And so when we send a player down, like, we send them down with clear goals. And I will say that development often takes an army to work. You know, we often talk about development like it's one coach talking with one player in the cage, or, you know, in the bullpen, or whatever. That's not how it works in these types of organizations. It takes, you know, coaches who are in it for the right reasons, putting in work behind the scenes when no one's looking, and crediting the players for really buying into the tedious and oftentimes difficult process of getting better. It also takes a lot of work from people that you don't see or you don't even associate with development. It takes, you know, work from analysts who come up with great ideas, or it takes work from developers who build tools that coaches can use, or, you know, coordinators who are often the engine behind development, even if they're not, you know, seen on the field working directly with the players. So when I see a story like Parker, first of all, I'm glad he's ours, and I'm glad that he's in this organization and he's helping us win games. And I'm also glad that, you know, everyone that touched Parker on the way up from when he was drafted to, you know, developing on his way to get to the big leagues for the first time. And then especially when he got sent down, making the swing changes and rebuilding his confidence to put him in a position where he can come up against Cincinnati, have a big series, then face adversity again with another injury, but still come back and be a better player than he's ever been right now. So we got to stay focused on that. When we see young players struggle at this level, we got to fight the urge to give up on them, because, you know, it would have been very easy for organizations to give up on players that were struggling as badly as Parker did. But in this organization, we're gonna sprint the other way. We're gonna double down on these young guys, and we're gonna find a way to reach them and allow for their talent to help them, you know, reach the ceiling that we think that they can ultimately reach at this level. So really, really proud of Parker first and foremost, but proud of the whole organization for all the work that everybody put in behind the scenes when no one was looking to help him get to where he is.
I think you alluded to something probably not a lot of fans understand, which is just the number of people and the enormity of every decision that can happen in an organization. Like, in your offices, how many ideas do you think get thrown around that probably never even make their way to a player or to the field?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I can't even keep up on Slack. Like, my Slack threads are a disaster zone. I feel like every night I like stay up and try to catch up on all that stuff until my eyes fail me. But, you know, the best organizations in baseball have a lot of talented people in a bunch of different departments who are all contributing towards one common goal. I think we're getting there. And I think, you know, one of the things I'm proud of in the last 2 years is that we have spent significant resources in building this organization the right way. You know, fortunately, Chris Ilitch gives us the resources for a really big coaching staff, for big player development staff, for new facilities up and down the organization, and for cutting edge technology at every level. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't just happen because we want it to happen. It happens with, you know, long hours and very tedious work to put people in the right place, and also to vet some of the ideas that get thrown around. Some of these ideas are just triple bank shots that never see the light of day, but some of them start looking like triple bank shots and end up being, you know, non-traditional pitching strategies that help us take off in the second half. So it takes a lot of talented people. I know I'm the one on the podcast describing this, but I don't deserve all the credit. There is a bunch of people that and a bunch of names you never heard of that are all contributing to this run in the second half and are hopefully going to contribute to many successful years in the future.
How do you manage all the notifications on your phone?
Oh my God, it's a mess. I have 865 unread text messages right now. So
Oh my God.
yeah,
Yes.
which means I'm way behind.
Remind me to never complain about notifications on my phone again.
I feel, we have Scott on turning the corner, and like we've talked about a lot of interesting subjects here. I don't have like a huge like lean or some big diatribe to go into, but I just feel weird if we don't talk about like Tarik Skubal and Riley Greene, two All Stars for the team this year, and especially Skubal with what he could potentially add to his trophy case, and then Greene being the first position player voted into the All Star game in some years for the Tigers. What for your job, Scott? Like, what does it do for your confidence and your ability to construct a roster when you have two guys of that caliber? Just like sitting there ready to add talent around them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess two observations to start. One, we have done this whole podcast without even talking about our two all-stars. There's a lot of content in this organization right now. There's a lot of exciting players to talk about, which is a good thing. It's a great sign of health. It's not a moment to, step back and get complacent and admire like all the progress. It's a moment to try to really dig into what is going well right now and try to double down on those things. So the fact that it took so long to get to these two players is probably a really good sign for this organization. But it's not at all a commentary on their value to this organization. Like those are our two all stars. That should tell you everything you need to know. Oftentimes, I think about players in terms of how I feel when the game's on the line and they're the ones at the plate or on the mound. And I feel great when those two guys are in it. Like we have Skubal going tomorrow night against the Rays, and I think everyone in the building is going to be really confident handing the ball to him. And there were a bunch of instances on this road trip where Riley came up in a big spot, and we felt great about it because we feel like they're really talented players, but they also are obsessed with finding ways to get better, which is the type of organization we're trying to run. And those are excellent examples for the players currently on our team, but excellent examples for like the Max Clarks and Kevin McGonigals and Tyron Lorenzo's and all of the young players that are, still coming up to look up and see those guys as examples of, what it looks and feels like to be a Tiger. And so I feel great that those guys are in this organization. I feel like they've really helped us win a lot of games in the second half here, and I think they're going to help us win a lot of games moving forward.
When you took this job about 2 years ago, I'm sure you were able to look at the roster and say, okay, Tarik Skubal, that's a really good young player. What do you think has allowed him to take the step he has taken even since then to now be a likely Cy Young winner?
Yeah, I've talked about this quite a bit recently. I think it boils down to what I just said, an obsession with getting better. From the moment I think he texted me like shortly after I was named, wanting to introduce himself, and then he's often, just come sought me out or a coach out or an analyst or someone out and just asked a question about how he was doing things, and how he could get better. He talked a lot on various podcasts about the development of his changeup and seam shifted wake and how that was a new concept for him, and then he just put it into practice. The dude's obsessed with finding a way to contort his body in such a way that allows him to get to that changeup, and now it's arguably his best pitch right now. There was also a story about how he got to the All-Star game, and instead of sitting back and just enjoying the experience, he just started asking the other players, "Hey, what do you got on me? Like how do you approach me?" I think that's emblematic of what makes him such a great competitor, which makes him someone who is uniquely positioned to get better at every turn. And again, it's just such a great example for the other players that we have coming up, the guys like Jaden Ham, who are already on the path of getting better. But when they look up and they see a guy who's probably going to win the Cy Young, who is still talking about finding ways to get better even while he's an all-star, like that's all you could ask for.
I think if I was one of those players, I would lie and
Right?
see if
Of
see if
course they lied.
Skubal would.
Yeah, I can't really hit the hanging curveball middle, so you should throw that. It's your fourth best pitch.
Well, we're about to witness the last week of the season. The Tigers are obviously in the middle of a playoff hunt. Currently hold the lead in order for the last playoff spot. So let's talk about the offseason for a second. And I'm just playing, but I did kind of want to ask, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how enjoyable is any offseason talk? Because we did, in fairness, we did kind of get that just a national media perspective. Like, people were talking about it last week, So, like, when that conversation is being had at a time where a team is trying to make a real playoff push, what kind of goes through your head?
Um, I mean, Cody talks to AJ every day and asks, and Cody doesn't ask these questions, but some people ask big picture questions, and he often, hand checks those questions and talks about today's game and focusing on finding a way to, beat the Orioles or beat the Rays. We ask our players at every turn to be where their feet are. We ask them to channel all of this energy towards finding a way to, tomorrow night beat the Rays. I feel like in my job, I need to I need to walk the walk when it comes to that stuff. Uh, Partly because I think there are things that we can do this week that can shift the odds a little bit in our favor, can help us, squeak out another game that can, maybe be the difference between us getting the playoffs or not. And I'm also just intensely competitive. I wouldn't be in this job if I wasn't very competitive. So there are times when your mind just kind of wanders to the winter or the off season. But I just try to get back to the present because these types of races are really special. It's really energizing. It's nerve wracking. It's anxiety inducing. It's all these different ranges of emotions. But I try to channel all that energy into, hey, what can I do today to help us make a playoffs? And today called up Jackson Jobe, and that kind of helps us get to the playoffs, hopefully. So yeah, I mean, I'm human, and my mind does drift. I try not to think too much about it. There's going to be plenty of time to think through that stuff. And if I spend a minute distracted from the present and this playoff chase, thinking about the off season, I think it's like a wasted minute. At least that's what my current headspace tells me.
Pretty much every day I think, all right, like what's a good question for AJ today? And then I ask myself, like, will he answer this with I'm just focused on winning today's game? And if I think that's the case, then I just scratch that off the list.
Yeah, I mean, listen. I know it sounds like a talking point every time. Like that's what we talk about in his office when you guys aren't there. We talk about, we obsess over what the pitching plan is, or we obsess over, what that team did over the last 10 days or whatever. To the point of one of your prior questions, there are a lot of ideas and thoughts that don't actually get onto the field on a nightly basis, but we have to get through all of that stuff in order to get to the right decisions that can ultimately help us win. So there's just a lot of work that goes into winning baseball games, and that's occupying the vast majority of our time these days.
In your mind, what I mean, this is broad, but what makes AJ such a good manager?
Oh man. Um, I think I talk about how I'm obsessive about details and trying to find, ways to get an edge, even if it's a tiny little edge. His mind works the same way. We talk probably 100 times a day about every possible subject. He veers often outside of his own lane to contribute in other areas, and I really appreciate that from him because he has one of the more unique paths to where he is. He obviously was a really talented amateur player, played for Team USA, and then he was, a minor league player, a big league player, a director of player development, an assistant GM, a manager in 3 different places. So he has a diverse collection of experiences that allows him to both think through things in a much more thoughtful and comprehensive way, but also like that contributes to his ability to relate to different players. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've seen him connect with a player by starting with like, "Hey man, I've been there. Like I get it. Like I totally understand." And he says it in such an authentic way. It's not, patronizing in any way. So I think he has a unique ability to empathize with most of the players that come through our clubhouse. He's very bright, he's very talented, and he's very curious too. I mean, I can't tell you how many conversations we have about different elements of the job and whether we can think differently about how to approach a certain problem. He's an incredible thought partner. He's done an incredible job for us. I no disrespect to the other managers who have done a great job, but he's the manager of the year for me. He deserves a ton of credit for molding, I think the youngest team in baseball into a highly confident, prepared group that expects to win every night. That doesn't just happen in every market. I think it's a tribute to all of the work he does on every little detail and his preparation and ability to connect with many different players from many different types of backgrounds.
All right, well, Scott, we appreciate you taking the time on a Monday night of immense news as it turned out, and as we discussed. So, well, why don't we wrap up with a little bit a non-baseball question? Cody and I are both from Texas. Went to college at Oklahoma State together, so we love barbecue. So I know you've lived in different parts of the country. Do you have a favorite barbecue dish?
Ooh. Yeah, ribs for sure. I Yeah, definitely ribs.
Okay.
Does that mean you're gonna offer me some?
If you will come over to my house, I will make you anything that you want. I got ribs in the freezer right now. I could do it. I could do it tomorrow. You come over, but then you miss the game.
I actually
So.
I got my dad a smoker for Christmas,
Oh,
and
there you
he
go.
keeps telling me he's perfecting the ribs recipe. So when I go home, over the holidays or something, he's pretty confident that he's going to be able to deliver on ribs. So I'll compare his ribs to yours if I ever make it out to your
All
house.
right, let's plan on it. But yeah,
Just be careful, Scott. You're gonna have to step over like 3 dogs and 4 cats just to get to the kitchen over at Kieran's
Oh,
house.
geez.
well, wife's a veterinarian, so it kind of comes with the territory, right? Uh, and normally there's one with me in here, but I was able to convince him he didn't need to stay in for this interview. But rest assured, one of my dogs really wanted to be in on this interview. So, uh,
It feels like it might be uncomfortable eating like a full slab of ribs at a table with a veterinarian, but I guess you've
so
done it many times.
every day, not the ribs specifically, but but cooked meat, yes, every day. We make it work. All right, Scott. Appreciate you taking the time. Like I said, on a busy day, up right in front of a week that Tigers fans have been looking forward to the possibility of for years, and now it's right in front of us, and yeah, so it's not lost on us that you took the time on such a newsworthy and busy time out of your schedule. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, and we know your
Yeah, of
text
course.
messages are probably over 1,000 right now. So good luck catching up with all that.
No, I appreciate it, guys. And to all the listeners, come support us this week. Our young guys got to see what hostile environments look like in San Diego and Baltimore, like packed houses where they're actively rooting against our players. Many of these young guys haven't seen what a packed Comerica Park can look like when everyone's on your side. So I'm actually really excited to experience it this week, and would love to invite anyone else to come cheer on this team. They're really fun to watch, especially in person.
Great point.
Absolutely, looking forward to watching it. All right, Scott Harris, president of baseball operations for the Detroit Tigers, joining Turning the Corner. Scott, thanks again, and have a good night.
Thanks, guys. You too.